to Loom of Dreams. This is a place where stories are woven softly, thread by thread, until they become a blanket of quiet comfort around you. Before we begin tonight's story, let's take a few moments to settle the body and quiet the mind. If you'd like, close your eyes now. Let the rest of the world fade a little. Notice where you are, the shape of the room, the stillness of the air, the gentle warmth that surrounds you. Now, take a slow breath in through your nose. Feel your chest lift and your belly rise. And then slowly breathe out through your mouth, as if you're blowing warm air onto a window. Let your shoulders drop and feel that breath leave gently, like a sigh. Again, inhale softly, not too deep, just enough to feel the cool air enter. Pause for a moment and exhale slowly. Each time you breathe, imagine the air moving like a wave, in and out, steady and kind. Your body begins to understand this rhythm, the same rhythm as a calm sea at night, the same rhythm as the fire in the hearth. If your mind begins to wander, that's perfectly fine. Just notice it and bring it back to your breath, back to the sound of the fire, back to the quiet in your room. Now feel your body growing heavier, your hands resting loosely, your jaw unclenching, your eyes softening behind closed lids. Let your breath find its own pace. There's nothing you need to do. You are safe, you are home, and you are ready to rest. Liv noticed it first, not by looking, but by listening. The sound against the window changed, less sand-like, more soft, a steady hush like fabric being shaken out. She stood at the kitchen window for a moment and watched. In one of the wind's quieter breaths, she could almost make out the tip of a pine tree beyond the curtain of snow, a dark point appearing, then fading, then appearing again, a small sign that the world still had shape, that it might return. Behind her, the kitchen had grown even warmer with work. Her mother moved between counter and oven, cheeks slightly flushed. Solveig stirred the pot, tasted, adjusted, her motions unhurried, confident. And on the counter, under a clean cloth, the dough waited. Liv remembered it suddenly, as if remembering a friend who had been quietly keeping a promise in the corner. She went to the bowl and lifted the cloth. The dough had risen. It wasn't dramatic, not overflowing, not wild. It had simply changed. It was fuller now, rounded, the surface smooth and faintly glossy, as if it had taken on a soft, private light of its own. Liv smiled before she could stop herself. Something about it, something about this gentle growth, made her chest loosen. She brought her finger down and pressed lightly into the dough. The indentation stayed for a beat, then slowly, slowly, it began to spring back, not snapping back, not hurried, just returning, calmly, as if to say, yes, time is passing. Yes, warmth is working. Yes, good things can happen quietly. Liv pressed once more, even more softly. The dough responded again, patient and alive. Her mother glanced over. "Perfect," she said, her voice warm. Solveig leaned in too, nodding with approval. "There, you see? You don't pull it forward. You give it what it needs, and it comes." Liv swallowed, feeling that the words were about more than dough. She didn't say so. She simply covered the bowl again, carefully, as if tucking in something that deserved tenderness. Then she looked out the window once more. The pine tip appeared again in another lull of wind, a little clearer this time. The whiteness had not gone, but it had softened. Liv's mind tried to leap ahead to the harbor, to the crossing, to whether her father would find the right moment in this shifting weather. But the dough's quiet progress stayed with her. Waiting has movement, she reminded herself. Not visible movement, not always, but real movement. Her mother began shaping the dough into rolls, pinching, folding, rounding each piece with practiced hands. The rolls lined up on the tray like small sleeping moons. Liv helped by dusting the board with flour and wiping away sticky bits, keeping the workspace clear. Flour drifted onto the counter like a friendly snowfall, the indoor kind that meant warmth was near. Solveig lifted the lid of the pot and the aroma filled the room. Herbs and onions and something deep and comforting that felt like the heart of winter made edible. Liv breathed it in and felt her shoulders drop.
Outside, the storm still insisted, but inside, the cottage kept answering with steady, ordinary miracles. Dough rising, soup simmering, fire holding, and somewhere in that rhythm, Liv's worry changed shape. It didn't disappear, but it softened just a little, like the snow beginning to fall instead of strike. She thought of her father again and imagined him waiting too, waiting for a lull, waiting for the right moment, reading the wind the way Solveig read a simmering pot. And she let herself believe, just slightly more than before, that today could still become what it was meant to be. A day that ended with warmth, a day that ended with light, a day that ended with a chair no longer empty. As afternoon leaned toward evening, the cottage began to shift into a different mood, not because anyone said so, but because the light changed. Stormlight in the morning was a flat, pale thing, stretched thin over the world. But now, as the day lowered, the brightness outside turned softer, dimmer, more blue. The wind, too, began to lower its voice. It still moved, still roamed around the cottage, but it no longer slammed itself against the walls with the same hard insistence. Instead, it passed by in gentler gusts, as if it were finally growing tired. Liv noticed the difference in the snow. The sound against the windows faded from scraping to hush, and when she looked out, she saw something that made her hold her breath. The flakes were larger now, not the fine sandy spray of earlier, but bigger pieces of white, drifting and turning as if they had time to be beautiful. The snow was beginning to become snow again. Solveig seemed to notice too, because she set her spoon down and wiped her hands on her apron. She turned to Liv and spoke quietly. "All right," she said. "It's time." Liv's heart gave a small jump, as if she had been waiting for those words without admitting it. Solveig nodded toward the brass lantern by the window, the one she had polished until it held the kitchen's light like a small sun. "It's nearly evening," Solveig continued. "Go on then, light it." Liv didn't rush. She moved the way the day had taught her to move, slow, steady, deliberate. She took a matchbox from the shelf, the cardboard worn at the edges. She held it for a moment, feeling the tiny weight of it in her palm. Such a small thing to feel so important. She carried the lantern carefully, cradling it as if it were fragile, even though it wasn't. Then she stepped toward the front door, paused, and pulled on her coat. The cottage was warm enough that the coat felt almost unnecessary, but she knew the moment she opened the door, winter would rush in. She wrapped a scarf around her neck, tucked stray hair back, then lifted the latch. The door opened with a soft groan. Cold air poured in immediately, sharp and clean, filling her lungs like a sudden truth. The porch boards were dusted with snow, their edges softened and rounded, as if the storm had been sanding the world down into gentleness. Liv stepped outside. The snow drifted through the air in slow, floating movements, turning in the porch light, moving as if the sky were breathing. It was still cold, still winter, but it no longer felt like an attack. Liv held the lantern in one hand and struck a match in the other. The first scrape did nothing. The second scrape caught, a small flare of orange that briefly lit her fingers and the brass. She cupped her hand around the flame, sheltering it from the wind. The flame trembled, then steadied. Liv opened the lantern and touched the match to the wick. For a moment there was only the scent of sulfur and the tiny crackle of burning wood. Then the wick caught. A warm, steady glow bloomed inside the lantern, not harsh, not bright like a spotlight, but soft and certain, like the first note of a lullaby.
Liv watched it for a few seconds, letting the sight sink into her chest. Here, she thought, here is the light. She hung the lantern in the most visible place, either on the porch hook facing the fjord or in the window that looked toward the sea, where its glow could become a small beacon against the whiteness. When she stepped back, the lantern's light painted the nearby snow in gold. Snowflakes drifted through it like slow, pale feathers, turning, falling, floating, as if they were learning how to be gentle again. Liv's worry didn't vanish, but it quieted, because the light made a statement. It said, "We are here. We are waiting. The way is not empty." Liv went back inside, closing the door softly behind her. The warmth wrapped around her immediately, and she exhaled, feeling the cold leave her cheeks. In the kitchen, her mother was sliding the last tray into the oven, something final for the meal, something that needed one last stretch of heat before the table could be complete. The oven door shut with a gentle thump. Her mother turned and looked at Liv. "Is it lit?" she quietly asked. Liv nodded. "Yes," she said, "it's lit." Solveig smiled just a little and returned to the pot. "Good," she murmured. "Now we keep doing what we can do and let the rest come." Liv glanced toward the dining room. The string lights were already glowing softly. The table was set. The candle holders waited. And now, beyond the window, the lantern shone steady and warm against the drifting snow. The house was becoming brighter, piece by piece, as if it were preparing not only a meal, but a welcome, as if it were saying to the storm and to the sea beyond it, "We have made a place for you, and when you come, you will find your way home." After Liv lit the lantern, the cottage seemed to settle into a new kind of quiet. Not the heavy quiet of morning, that muffled, pressed-down silence the blizzard had brought with it. This was different. This was a quiet with room inside it, a quiet that could hold small sounds without swallowing them. In the kitchen, everything moved toward completion. The soup had reached that steady, comforting stage where it no longer hurried. It simply existed, warm and faithful, with a slow, gentle bubbling at the surface. Glug, glug. A soft, rounded sound, like the pot was breathing. Solveig lifted the lid and stirred in slow circles with her wooden spoon. Steam rose and curled around her wrist, and when she leaned down to taste, she didn't rush her decision. She let the flavor sit for a moment, like a thought you turn over gently in your palm. Then she added the smallest pinch of salt and nodded once. "Good," she murmured, as if speaking to the day itself. Liv's mother moved between the counter and the oven with calm precision. A tray of vegetables had been pulled out to check their color, edges browning, surfaces glistening, the scent deepening into something rich and sweet. When she slid the tray back in, the oven gave out a rush of heat that made the air shimmer for a second, and the kitchen windows caught the firelight and returned it as a soft glow. The glass didn't look cold anymore. It looked warm, as if the fire had reached out and painted the windows from the inside. On the counter, the rolls rested under a cloth, rounded and ready. The dough that had risen so quietly all afternoon had become a row of patient little shapes, each one smooth, each one waiting. Liv brushed a fingertip over one roll and felt its gentle softness. Not sticky, not uncertain now, alive and prepared. Outside, the storm was still there, but it was no longer pushing the whole world. When Liv glanced through the dining room window, she saw the change clearly. The snow had grown larger, softer, not sharp grains flung sideways, but loose, drifting clusters, big, pale pieces that floated and turned as if they had time to be beautiful. Feather snow, the kind that seemed to fall for its own quiet reasons, not because the wind was forcing it. The porch boards were covered in a thick, rounded layer that made every edge look gentler, and the lantern's light, steady and warm, turned the falling flakes into gold and cream, so that even the cold outdoors looked softened by welcome. Liv stood for a moment with her hands resting lightly on the kitchen counter. It felt strange, almost miraculous, how the day had shifted. The world outside was still winter, still snow, still cold, still long night waiting. But now it was winter in a calmer mood. The wind had lowered its voice, and inside the cottage everything was becoming complete, as if the meal were not only being cooked, but being assembled piece by piece into something that could hold them. Liv returned to the dining room and checked the table again. She straightened the pine garland down the center, tucked a stray needle back into place. She adjusted a plate by the tiniest amount, not because it truly mattered, but because the act of making it neat mattered to her. The chair for her father sat ready, waiting quietly at its spot. Liv paused behind it. Her fingers rested on the back of the chair again, just for a moment, as if she could transfer a little warmth into the wood. Then she went to the string lights. They were already glowing, small and steady like a constellation caught indoors. She checked each bulb by sight, 1, 2, 3, making sure none had gone dark. It was a small ritual, but it soothed her. Light was reliable in a way weather was not. In the kitchen doorway, her mother appeared again with flour still faintly on her hands. She looked at the table, her expression softening. "Beautiful," she said quietly. But then, almost immediately, her gaze drifted toward the window, toward the fjord, toward the invisible path her husband would take. Liv saw it, the way her mother's eyes held that direction for a breath too long. Not panic, not despair, just a quiet, steady kind of care that had nowhere to go. Solveig spoke from the stove without looking up. "Let him have the time he needs," she said, voice calm as the soup. "He knows winter, and winter knows him." Liv's mother exhaled and nodded once, returning to the oven. And Liv did what she had learned to do all day. She kept her hands busy so her heart could stay quieter. She set the candles into their holders, simple brass cups on the table. She straightened each wick, leaving them unlit for now. Then she carried a basket of napkins, cloth, folded into rectangles, placing one at each plate. The fabric was cool beneath her fingertips, but it promised warmth later. In the kitchen, everything moved toward completion. The rolls went into the oven. Liv watched her mother slide the tray in with a gentle, confident thump. Almost at once, the scent began to rise, butter warming, yeast turning sweet, flour becoming bread. It was the kind of smell that didn't just fill a room, it filled a person. Liv felt it in her chest. The hearth crackled softly. The soup continued its patient bubbling. Outside, feather snow drifted through the lantern's glow like pale petals. Everything was moving toward evening. And still, in the quiet spaces between tasks, Liv's mind listened for something else. A sound beyond the kitchen. A footstep, a distant door, anything that would tell her the waiting had reached its end. So she did a small thing, almost without thinking. She went to the window and looked at the lantern again. It was steady. Its flame didn't shiver, not now. It simply held its light, warm and constant, as if it were saying, over and over, here, here, here. Liv let the sight settle inside her. Outside was growing gentler, inside was growing fuller, and somewhere not seen but felt, the evening was gathering itself, bringing with it the last piece the house was missing. It happened so quietly that at first Liv thought she imagined it, a sound, not from the kitchen, not from the simmering pot or the oven's soft breath, a different sound, muted, deliberate, a step on snow. Liv froze with a dish towel in her hands. She listened. There it was again, a slow crunch, then another, then a pause, as if whoever walked out there was letting the house speak first. Solveig's spoon stopped moving. Even Liv's mother, mid-motion, reaching for a tray, held still. For a moment, the cottage seemed to lean forward, listening with all of them. Then the porch boards gave a soft creak beneath weight, and the door latch clicked. Liv's breath caught. The door opened. Cold air entered in a single smooth wave, sharp, clean, bright, and for the briefest moment it made the kitchen feel smaller, more precious. Snowflakes drifted in too, feather soft, spinning through the warm air like startled white moths. But the cold didn't stay. The hearth reached for it immediately. The fire's warmth rose to meet the winter air and softened it, turning sharpness into freshness, turning intrusion into relief. And there he was. Liv's father stood in the doorway with snow clinging to the shoulders of his coat, dusting his hat brim, melting slowly at his eyelashes. His cheeks were flushed from cold. His eyes were tired but bright. He didn't speak dramatically. He didn't announce his arrival like a hero stepping in from a storm. He simply looked at them and smiled, as if this was the most natural end to the day. "I'm home," he said, softly. Liv moved before she could think. She crossed the room and wrapped her arms around him, pressing her cheek to his coat where it smelt of winter and something faintly salty, sea air trapped in fabric. His arms came around her, steady and warm despite the cold. There was no need for long words. The hug was enough. Liv's mother stepped forward next. She didn't rush, but her hands found his shoulders, brushing snow away as if she could erase the day's worry with that simple motion. "You made it," she whispered. He nodded once. "I waited," he said. The wind had to finish speaking first. Solveig approached last, calm as ever, as if she had known this would happen all along. She placed a hand briefly on his arm. "Good," she said. "Come in properly. Warm up." Liv's father removed his boots, setting them neatly by the door. He shook off his gloves, and a few last flakes fell to the floor, already turning to water in the heat. He glanced toward the window then, and his gaze landed on the lantern. The brass glow sat steady against the evening snow, a small warm eye looking out toward the fjord. His smile deepened. "I saw it," he said quietly, as if sharing a secret with the room. "Even when the world was white, the light stayed." Liv felt something inside her loosen. All day her worry had been like a tight thread drawn through her chest. Now it slackened, softened, and finally released. She watched her father step closer to the hearth and hold his hands to the warmth. The firelight painted his face in amber. The steam from the soup drifted past him like a welcome. Everything that had felt uncertain all day suddenly felt anchored, because he was here, because the chair at the table was no longer only a place set with hope. It belonged to someone again. Solveig ladled him a small cup of hot tea first, ginger and honey, because she believed in beginnings. Liv's mother touched his sleeve and asked the simplest question in the world. "Hungry?" He chuckled softly. "Very." Liv stood close, watching him warm up, watching the snow melt away from him. Outside, the feather snow continued to fall, calm and light. Inside, the cottage held its warmth as if it had been saving it all day for this moment. And when Liv finally let herself breathe fully again, it felt like she was breathing for the first time since morning. It was only after the first warmth had returned to his hands, after the tea had soothed his throat, after the room had adjusted to the fact that he was truly, finally here, that Liv's father reached into his bag. Not a big bag, just a weather-worn canvas sack, damp at the bottom from snow, smelling faintly of salt and rope. He set it on the bench by the hearth and glanced at Liv. "I have something for you," he said, gently. Liv's heart gave a small lift, not the bright, jumping kind of excitement, a quieter kind, as if something tender inside her had stood up and stretched. Her father pulled out a small object wrapped in cloth. The cloth was simple, gray linen tied with a thin piece of twine. The knot was careful, the way Solveig tied knots when she wanted them to hold. He placed it in Liv's hands. It was warm already from being near her coat, and yet it seemed to carry a hint of cold, too, as if the outside world still clung to it in a polite whisper. "Open it slowly," he said, smiling. Liv loosened the twine and unfolded the cloth. Inside was a piece of sea glass. Not large, not flashy, just a smooth, rounded shard of green-blue, softened by years of water and stone. It looked like winter light, like a small bit of the fjord made solid. Her father had threaded it on a thin cord, simple and dark, so it could be worn close to the skin. "It was on the island shore," he said. "After the wind eased, I walked for a moment. I found this where the sea had thrown it back." Liv lifted it into the firelight. The glass caught the warm glow and changed, becoming deeper, richer, almost luminous. It didn't sparkle like a jewel. It glowed quietly from within, like the lantern flame in the snow, like embers beneath ash. Solveig leaned in slightly, her eyes soft with recognition. "A good piece," she said. "The sea took its sharp edges away." Liv's father nodded. "That's why I kept it," he said. "It reminded me of this house. Winter can be hard, but if you wait long enough, it becomes gentle again." Liv swallowed. She could feel how much he meant without him saying it outright. That the gift wasn't really sea glass. It was time. It was patience. It was proof that he had thought of her even while the storm was still speaking. Outside, feather snow drifted past the porch lantern, turning gold where the light touched it. Liv held the sea glass in her palm, its smoothness pressed against her skin like a promise. She didn't have a dramatic response, no big gasp, no sudden speech. That wasn't Liv's way. Instead, she closed her fingers around it and held it still, letting the warmth of her hand meet the coolness of the glass. "I love it," she said finally, quietly, honestly. Her father smiled, as if that was exactly enough. Liv's mother reached out and brushed her thumb over the sea glass once, just to feel its smooth surface. Then she nodded too, approval and relief and affection all tangled together. Solveig returned to the stove, satisfied, because in her mind the world had returned to its proper order. The light was lit, the family was gathered, the meal was nearly ready. Liv tucked the sea glass back into the cloth for a moment, then slipped the cord over her head and let it rest at her chest. Warm skin beneath, smooth winter glass above. She could feel it there with every breath. And that was the point, because tonight the gift did not need to be displayed on a shelf. It was meant to be carried, a small proof of safe return, held close, as the house moved toward the table, as the snow fell softly outside, as the day finally became what it had been preparing to be all along. When they sat down to eat, it felt as if the cottage itself sat with them. The dining room glowed softly. String lights warmed the corners and softened the shadows. 2 candles flickered in their brass holders, flames steady and calm. And beyond the window, the porch lantern shone like a small lighthouse against the feather snow. The tablecloth lay smooth, every crease tamed. The pine garland breathed its clean forest scent between the plates. The dried orange slices caught candlelight and turned translucent, like stained glass made of fruit. Liv took her seat, and her father took his. The chair that had waited all day was no longer a symbol. It was simply occupied. Her mother brought the bread first. The rolls had baked into a gentle golden color, their tops slightly cracked, as if they had smiled in the oven. When she set the basket down, steam rose through the cloth like a warm sigh. Liv lifted one roll and pulled it apart. It separated with the softest tear, and inside was a pale, tender crumb, releasing heat and the faint sweetness of yeast. The warmth rose to her face. It smelled like comfort, like an embrace you could eat. Solveig lowered soup into bowls, careful, steady, practiced. The surface shimmered with herbs, little islands of green and gold. The first spoonful was quiet, not because anyone felt awkward, because the first warmth of a meal on a long, weather-heavy day deserves silence. Liv tasted. The soup was rich and gentle, the kind that made your chest loosen. The bread was soft and warm in her hands. Across from her, her father looked at the table, at the candles, at the pine, at the light in the window, and his expression softened into something almost sleepy. "It smells like home," he said. Solveig nodded once, as if this were a simple fact of life. "It is home," she replied. Her mother smiled, and for the first time all day, Liv saw her mother's gaze drift toward the fjord without that tight edge of worry. Now the look was different. Now it was gratitude. They ate slowly. They spoke in small pieces. Her father mentioned how the wind had been strongest around midday, how he waited where the boats were sheltered, sipping tea from a thermos and watching the snow. He didn't dramatize it. He made it sound the way steady people make hard things sound, manageable, temporary, understood. Once it softened, he followed the light. His eyes lifted to the lantern in the window. It was there, he added, almost to himself, like it promised it would be. Liv touched the sea glass pendant at her chest, just a small press of her fingers against the smooth surface, a reminder. As the meal continued, the room warmed further, not only from the hearth, but from the simple fact of bodies gathered around a table. Laughter arrived quietly, not in bursts, but in gentle waves. Solveig teased Liv's father about how he always returned with sea salt in his hair. Her mother corrected him on a detail about the rolls. He claimed he could smell them from the porch, and she told him that was impossible, then smiled anyway. Outside, the feather snow kept falling, slow, light, as if the sky had decided to become kind. After dinner, the sounds shifted again. Plates were carried to the kitchen. Water ran into the sink with a comforting rush. Cutlery clinked softly as it was set down. Solveig folded the tablecloth's corners with care, smoothing it even as she gathered it, as if she believed fabric remembered how it was treated. Liv dried dishes with a towel, watching her father rinse bowls, watching her mother stack plates, watching how natural it looked, the four of them moving around one another without hurry, a home rhythm. Later, when the kitchen finally quieted, the hearth still held its steady flame. The lantern still shone in the window. The last bread basket sat empty but for crumbs, tiny signs of warmth shared. Liv drifted upstairs to the loft, holding her pendant lightly as she climbed. In her room, the air was cool again, but not cold. She changed into something soft, then moved to the window one last time. Outside, the world was a gentle blur of drifting white. Feather snow falling as if it had all the time in the world. The lantern's glow made a small golden circle on the porch, and flakes passed through it like slow-moving stars. Liv rested her forehead against the glass. The cold met her skin, but it didn't feel frightening now, because the light was still there, steady, certain, because downstairs the fire would become embers again, glowing modestly through the night, because her father was home. Liv closed her eyes and let the day settle inside her, light, bread, fire, snow, all of it softening into one warm, quiet truth. And when she finally stepped back from the window, she felt the same gentleness inside her that she saw outside. The lamp still glowed, the snow still drifted, and her heart at last did too.